The cuffs clicked so hard I swear the sound bounced off the gas pumps, my face pressed into asphalt, hot enough to fry an egg, and a young cop's voice above me laughed at my ID like it was a party trick. Yeah, that happened right there by Pump 3 at the Sunoco on Route 47 with a dozen phones pointed my way, and in that split second between the knee in my back and the camera flash, I knew two things at once. One, I was still Judge Arthur Davis, Federal District Court, and two, none of that was going to matter to these officers who had already decided what story they were in. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been in chambers wearing Tuesday casual crisp shirt, dark jeans, glasses halfway down my nose while I worked a stack of files that would have kept any honest cop up at night. Allegations of planted evidence, ghost stops, a culture that rewarded numbers over truth. And in the morning, I was slated to preside over the biggest police corruption trial our city had ever seen. You can call that foreshadowing if you want. I call it the universe clearing its throat because I only pulled off to get gas. I only wanted to beat the traffic to a meeting with federal prosecutors. I only wanted a quiet evening. And then I saw the patrol car that had been shadowing me for 3 miles slide in behind the BMW like a shark that finally decided to bite. 2 officers stepped out, one white, one Hispanic, young, tight, carrying the kind of energy you can feel before you hear it. The white one officer. Sean Evans gave me the kind of smile you give a kid. You plan to shove his partner. Officer Luis Navarro glanced at my hands and then at his gun, like he'd practiced that move more than he'd practiced common sense. And when I turned calm, palms visible, I did the thing you teach your children to do, even when it breaks your heart. I spoke softly. I told the truth. I said, "Good afternoon, officers. I'm Judge Arthur Davis with the Federal District Court. If you need to verify my identity, my credentials are in my wallet." The temperature didn't change, but the air did. Sean's face went red in a way I've seen in court right before somebody blurts out something they can't take back. He sneered. "Oh, so now you're a federal judge. What next? You gonna tell us? You're the president, too." And when I reached slowly for the wallet, he had already decided was a lie. Luis pulled his weapon. People scattered. Others pressed record. The station owner, Omar Khan, lifted his phone without a word, and I did what I've told defendants to do 1,000 times: hands, where they can see them. Voice even lungs steady, and none of it mattered. Hands on the car, turn around, fingers interlaced, knee down, and then the cuffs tight enough to make my fingers tingle. Tight enough to say, this isn't about safety, this is about teaching someone a lesson. They took my wallet, flipped it open, and for half a second I saw doubt pass over Luis's face, like the badge hologram caught the sun and caught his conscience too. He murmured, "Sean, look at this." And Sean snatched the credential like a prop, held it up to the crowd and laughed. "Federal judge? Yeah, right. And I'm the president. Nice fake drug dealer." The words were bait for the cameras and the story he had already rehearsed, and then the routine kicked in. Pat down pockets, medication bottle held up like a trophy. "What's this, blood pressure medication? My name's on the label. Doesn't matter, pills," he declared for the microphones that weren't his. And then, like a stage magician who forgot the audience can see his sleeves, Luis palmed a tiny baggie from his own belt and pretended to fish it from my console. I heard the gasp ripple through the lot. Omar said softly, "I got that." And I thought, remember this moment, remember this angle, remember the way the plastic gleamed, because there's a difference between a story and evidence, and I was being forced through one and building the other. They shoved me into the back of the cruiser. The door thudded shut with that thick final sound, and as the car pulled away, I cataloged every violation the way a man marks pages with his thumb. Unlawful stop, no probable cause, refusal to acknowledge clear ID, warrantless search, constructive possession, stunt, humiliation as a tactic. I wasn't reciting case law to be clever. I was keeping my mind from breaking on the wheel of someone else's lie. You know what I mean? Sometimes you count the lines so you don't drown in the picture. The 7th Street Precinct looked like it was designed to be ugly on purpose. Harsh lights dinged counters gray that makes your skin forget it has color. Desk Sergeant Chris Johnson barely glanced up until Sean dropped my wallet on the wood like a trophy deer drug dealer impersonating a federal judge. He said with a swagger he hadn't earned, and Chris, 12 years in eyes that had seen real things, picked up. The credential tilted it in the light, ran a thumb across the seal, looked at me, looked at the photo, and something in his expression said, "This is not right." Then he shoved that thought down and started typing, because there's a script to booking, just like there's a script to a traffic stop, name, address, phone call later. "You'll get your call," he said. and that more than the cuffs made me angry because constitutional rights don't start on someone else's schedule. The holding cell smelled like bleach and regret metal bench along one wall, a toilet that made privacy feel like a rumor. I sat fingers buzzing, mind cold and clear like the morning after a storm, and listened to the confidence of men who had mistaken authority for wisdom, possession with intent, resisting false ID obstruction. Sean narrated to anyone who'd listen. Luis added the meds, and a younger officer said, "From somewhere, I couldn't see. You got it all on video, right?" And Omar's voice came back calm and sharp. "We got everything. Cameras are memory now. I thought cameras are witnesses. You can't bully." Back at the courthouse, my clerk, Emily Chin, stared at the clock, and then at my empty chair, and then at the messages on her screen. I don't miss meetings. I don't miss calls. I don't ghost. So by early evening, she had the marshal's office checking badges and lobby cameras. She had called my emergency contacts in my building, and at 7 p.m., she was talking to FBI liaison Jessica Adams. A dozen words that change momentum fast. Judge assigned to a police corruption case is missing. What followed was federal muscle moving, the way you pray it moves, if you ever need it. Social media checks plate readers, a shaky video at a gas station that went from 3 screens to 3 million in an hour, a pause on a frame that showed my badge clear as water, the nurse at the next pump narrating the planted bag, the teen's live stream catching Sean's line about being the president, and Jessica on a secure line saying we're treating this as interference with federal judicial proceedings. That is not a phrase anyone in a precinct wants to hear at dinner time. Captain David Miller showed up at booking with his jaw set and his eyes unsure. He took my ID in his hands and looked at it like he was touching a live wire. "This looks authentic," he said, and Sean, committed to the performance, spat back. "High-quality fake." "Captain, look at the suspect. Expensive car. Nervous. Classic profile," I said as evenly as I could. "Captain, I am Judge Arthur Davis, and I strongly suggest you call the federal court right now." And for a breath, I thought he might then pride, and the fear of embarrassment did what they always do. They bought another hour with someone else's life. By then, the phones behind the desk sounded like alarms. The mayor's office on one line, a cable network on another, a colleague of mine calling to ask where the hell I was, and Chris the sergeant, who had looked at my badge and swallowed hard, paced with a face that said he wanted permission to do the right thing. Around midnight, the lobby doors opened and changed the barometric pressure. FBI Jessica Adams' credentials held steady voice, flat and professional in the way only people with actual power manage. "We're here to secure the immediate release of Judge Davis, preserve all digital and physical evidence, and place the arresting officers in federal custody." Captain Miller tried the script. "We were just about to." Jessica gave him one raised hand. "Captain, you've had hours." I stood when the cell door opened, wrists stripped raw where steel had kissed them a little too hard. And when I stepped into the booking area with Jessica on my left, I saw how quickly stories collapse when truth is spoken in a voice that doesn't waver. The uniformed swagger shrank, the excuses turned into paperwork. That should be the end, right? The hero walks out, the credits roll. But the truth is, sunrise starts its own act at 6 a.m. Across town, federal agents knocked on the door of a tidy house in a cul-de-sac and read Sean Evans, the same rights he'd trampled on me 12 hours earlier. His wife stood behind him in a robe, clutching a coffee mug with both hands, because nobody ever imagines federal charges with their cereal 3 miles away. They knocked on Luis Navarro's apartment, and he said, "What guilty men who want to sleep again say I want to cooperate?" And at the precinct offices were sealed hard drives, bagged logs printed. Captain Miller was led past the mural that says "Serve and Protect," and Chief Robert Martinez, who had spent the night trying not to say the words "catastrophic mistake," met a team that had no interest in his spin. I recused myself. Of course I did. I can't preside over a case where I'm the complaining witness. So I sat in the gallery while Special Prosecutor Isabella Garcia did what real prosecutors do: slow, careful, relentless exhibit by exhibit until the air itself starts to hold the defendants down. Omar took the stand and told the truth without theatrics. I recorded what I saw because it was wrong. The nurse described the planted bag with a calm that stung worse than outrage. The teen showed her stream and apologized for saying, "Oh my God," so many times. And then Luis, voice shaking, admitted the dirty practice every defense attorney in this city has whispered about for years. "We carried throw-down baggies. We used them when we needed to justify a stop that didn't fly. and people in the room made that low sound you hear when a church realizes its roof leaks in the rain. Jessica put up the enhanced frames, paused on Luis's fingers, outlined the chain of custody, cited 18 U.S.C. 242-1512. You could feel the jury lean toward gravity. When Sean tried to explain it landed like a dull thud. He said I matched a suspect description and looked nervous. He said the ID looked fake. Isabella said, how many fake federal judicial IDs have you seen? He said none. She said so. You rejected a credential. You've never seen faked because of the man holding it, because he owns a black BMW, because he didn't smile the way you wanted. She didn't have to say the rest, we all heard it anyway. Bias doesn't need a megaphone, it just needs leeway. And a badge can be a lot of leeway if nobody checks it. The verdicts came faster than anyone predicted. Guilty across the board, civil rights violations under color of law, conspiracy, obstruction, falsification, and on sentencing day, the judge laid out a map of consequences that felt less like revenge and more like physics. Sean got years that will teach him the difference between instinct and impulse. Luis got years too, with a nod to cooperation. Miller and Martinez took their share for building and protecting a culture that blurred the line between enforcement and abuse. The department got federal oversight for a decade, cameras that must be on audits, that must be blind stops, that require real reasons written in real words. A civilian board with a budget and teeth, not a plaque. People asked me how it felt to walk out. They want the Hollywood answer. They want me to say triumphant. They want swelling strings and a forgiving speech. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact. I felt tired in the bones. I felt grateful for strangers with phones who didn't look away. Grateful for a clerk who refused to treat my absence like a scheduling hiccup. Grateful for a federal agent who doesn't smile when the work is serious. I slept badly for a while. Not from pain, but from the echo of a voice telling me to stop moving while I reached for a wallet with my own name in it. And I started keeping my ID a half-inch higher on instinct, which tells you something about how quickly a person can learn a new flinch. The city named reforms after me. I asked them to name them after Omar, the guy who chose to film instead of mind his pump. They put my name on the resolution anyway because politicians love neat narratives. I donated my settlement to a fund that pays for lawyers when police paperwork pretends to be truth. I started talking to new officers, not like a judge, lectures a defendant, but like a neighbor who won't accept lazy. I tell them your badge is authority, but it isn't permission. Your training is a map, but it isn't a compass. You will be given leeway. Don't turn it into license. And some of them nod, like they heard me, and some of them fold their arms, like the room is cold, and time will show which ones are which. The twist in my story isn't that I'm a judge who got cuffed at a gas station. The twist is that the system actually worked once it was forced into the light. The twist is that a dozen phones did what a dozen memos could not. The twist is that people believe victims more quickly when the victim has a title and a suit, and that should make you angry. It makes me angry because while I got an FBI convoy and a press conference, I have read files for men and women who got a docket number and a shrug. Their stories never trended, their names never made the chyron. And if you think I don't hear them when I close my eyes, you're not listening to the way trauma echoes. I can still feel the heat of the asphalt and the weight of a knee, and I can still hear the sound of a plastic bag when it hits the sunlight. Just so small things have a way of turning into large truths. People ask whether I've forgiven the officers. I don't play that game on camera. Forgiveness is a personal act. Accountability is a public one. I believe in both, but I don't confuse them. I don't owe anyone the comfort of my pardon to justify the discomfort of their sentence. What I owe is work to make sure the laws we cite don't just sound impressive, but actually protect people without microphones. I keep a copy of the Constitution on my desk, like a lot of judges do. Thin paper, dense promise. I run my finger along the Fourth Amendment, sometimes the way you trace a scar that healed and still tingles in the rain. And I think about how rights are only as strong as the people willing to say, hold on, read that again out loud slowly. If you stood with me by Pump 3 on that day, you would have noticed the small things, the way the shadow of the canopy made everything look like a stage, the way the nurse shook her head once like a mother who's seen kids get foolish, the way the teen's hands trembled a little until she steadied them on the metal edge, the way Omar breathed out slow when he realized his video might change the shape of a night. That's what I carry, not the spectacle, but the precise kindness of strangers who decided to be witnesses. And if there's a lesson in my particular mess, it's not that titles protect you, it's that people can, if they choose, and choices stack up good and bad until you get culture, and culture is just choices repeated until nobody remembers their choices at all. So talk to me right here because this is the part of the story where I hand it off. Tell me what you saw in those frames. Tell me where the line is between a mistake and a crime, when a badge is involved. Tell me whether you've ever pulled out your phone when your stomach told you to keep your head down and what happened after. Tell me if you think the system worked or if it simply panicked because it picked the wrong target. Drop your city and your local time so we can map how far this conversation travels. Hit like, if you think accountability has to survive the heat of a parking lot, share this with someone who still says, it's just a few bad apples. Subscribe if you want stories that stay uncomfortable until something changes. And when you see a scene like mine, pump humming sun in your eyes, voices getting sharp, ask yourself the only question that mattered that day. Do you record courage or do you look away?